As we continue on today, so last week was answering the question, where does the courage come from? Where do we get the courage to live faithfully in a world that just doesn't believe? An age of unbelief, and it's really only it's not a bunch of ways to do it. There's one way, right? It's by having this just absolutely massive view of who God is and what he's doing in the world. That's it. As near as I can figure from God's word and from those who have gone before me, mentors that I've had, people who have discipled me, the thing that they have that I want is that they have this just absolutely massive understanding of who God is and the faith, and that's where their faith and courage comes from. I'm reminded of there's what Paul says in, I get these two books messed up all the time, Philippians and Ephesians. Ephesians 3, it's Philippians 3. It is Philippians 3, where he says, essentially said, he talks about his achievements. He also talks about his sins. He says, those things don't matter at all. I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection. And so I press onward toward the upward call of Christ. I'm not there. I don't fully know Jesus yet, but man, do I want to. Right, and there's a City of Light song that's the name of the song. The title of the song is I Want to Know You, and the chorus of the song is I want to know you, Jesus, my Lord, the King of the heavens, the King of my heart. I give all my treasures, give all that I am, Jesus, to know you, and then know you more. Right? That's the cry of our hearts. The only way that we get the courage to live faithfully is that we more and more and more know Jesus the rest of our lives. There was a woman at our previous church. She was 94 years old, I think, when she passed away. Had the opportunity to actually visit her a couple of weeks before she passed away, and she's an incredible lady. And we asked her, how can we pray for you? Up to her dying, she's like, just pray that I would know the Lord more. Like, man, come on, right? That's where courage comes from. And so we need to get that. We can't miss that piece, because if we go into the practical answering the questions, okay, where does courage show up and what does it actually look like on the ground level? That's not really going to matter, because you're not going to live that way anyway, because you can't manufacture the courage to live how God has called us to live. And so it's absolutely vital that we get that. We get that big picture, that God-sized view of life and who he is and who we are supposed to be, that transforms us and shapes the gospel. The glory of the gospel and beholding that is how we get more courage. And so this week, answering then, where does that courage show up and how does it look? So if somebody would be willing to look up 1 Peter 2, 9 through 11. And then Matthew 28, 18 to 20. Matt raised his hand. He's a good student. Come on, Dennis. I can take it back everything we said this morning. 1 Timothy 3, 2. John's got it. And then Psalm 139, verses 13 to 16. Thanks. I will call on you at the appropriate time. First Peter 2, 9, actually 9 through 12. It's 9 through 11 knows, but 9 through 12. So a couple of things to highlight in that text as Peter is exhorting and encouraging believers who are actually living in, like the diaspora had gone and Jews had been kicked out of Israel and Jerusalem, so they're scattered all over the world, and Peter's writing to these folks of like, how do you maintain your faithfulness to Jesus in a world that is actually trying to push you out? And there are two things that I think are really important for us to grasp and get a hold of, and they're ordinary things They're day in and day out things, and some ways they're stark contrasts to the world, but in other ways it's just subtly normal living and how we are to live. And the two things that what does courage look like? One is that we're exiles and that we live with integrity. Exiles mean and this is the part where it's difficult because as holy as we think we might be, there's more of the world in us than we would probably like to admit, right? There are things that we just become okay with and we see as normal that would keep us actually from standing out in a world where everybody wants to blend in a world where we have this weird balance of I'm a unique individual and yet I want to just be liked by everybody and accepted by everybody. We're not concerned so much with looking like and sounding like and acting like everybody else. We understand, as Peter exhorts these brothers and sisters, that this world isn't your home. Brothers and sisters, as exiles, as depending on the translation you use, as aliens, as strangers, as foreigners in this world. And then the verses before are really talking about how you're foreigners in this world. You're a chosen people. You're a royal priesthood. You're high priests in this world. You are interceding on behalf of the world before God, and you're the door between heaven and hell for people. You don't live in this world. And so really, a lot of what the gospel is doing when we think about this is getting the world out of us. Right? We live in the world, but not of the world, but it's getting the world out of us. And that's a lifelong process where we're asking honest questions and pursuing holiness and seeking to be set apart people, and then living it with integrity. Boy, do we need integrity in our day and age. How much do people who you know the classic definition. What's integrity? Well, it's doing the right thing even when nobody else is watching. It's also doing the right thing when everybody is watching, right? And I know, hypocrisy gets in the way of Jesus for us, but there's a way to live in which it doesn't. And here's how that plays out. At some level, right, if we're really, really honest, all of us are living in some sort of hypocritical way, whether we're aware of it or not. The wonderful thing about Christianity is that it's the only place where hypocrisy is dealt with. In that, Jesus came and was the only person who ever lived that was not hypocritical. He was righteous. He had the utmost integrity in everything that he thought, said, and did. And so for us, we practice repentance. We don't have the luxury of God's people of not changing. We just don't. If you are the same as you were a year ago, and you say you're a follower of Jesus Christ, we have to be able to ask some hard, difficult questions like, am I actually following him? If an unbeliever could look at my life and the way I conduct myself, the way our family lives, and all of it makes sense to them, we've got to ask real questions about the way that we conduct our lives, right? And so we don't just do good things. We don't just work, and it's that too. We're not just working hard for the sake of working hard and doing good and earning a paycheck. It's so that when accusations are brought before you, they fall flat on their face. And they will glorify your Father in heaven on the day of visitation, right? You see where you're all getting, it's always getting back to, the Bible's always getting back to, the writers of the Bible are always getting back to that day when he comes again, when we see him face to face again. And so we have to have an acute awareness of this isn't home. This isn't my final stepping off place. This isn't where it ends. And we live with integrity, constantly, consistently uprooting hypocrisy that we see in us. And the good news of the gospel is that there's grace and mercy to uproot those things. It gives us a means by which to do that. And the quote you see at the end of that section from the book is, courage pursues holiness and looks like integrity in a day and age of unbelief. And the second question there, where does it show up? What in our day-to-day lives, what does courage look like? Who has Matthew 28:18-20? And then 1 Timothy 3:2. All right, that's it. Notice some things about the Great Commission. You've heard that text before, right? Maybe you're less familiar with the verse that John read for us. The overseers certainly are familiar with it, as they should be. But the Great Commission, notice how incredibly normal the Great Commission is. I think we see it and we hear and be like, yeah, we're going to the ends of the earth and people are going out there. But notice what Jesus says. It's more accurate to say, as you go, make disciples. As you live your life, you're going to be going somewhere, whether that is overseas or whether that's to a prison or whether that's to meetings or your neighborhood that you live in. You're going to be going somewhere. Make disciples, teaching them to obey what we command. We think of teaching as a moment like this, which it is. But there's a side-by-side nature to Jesus' teaching. Understand that, right? When he walked with the disciples, he had sermons. He had moments where he had more in-depth teaching. But go back and go through and read the Gospels. Notice all the different times where he's teaching. He's teaching here. He's teaching there. He didn't need a crowd to do it. For 3 years, it was side-by-side teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. You can't teach all that Jesus commanded in 45 minutes, right? So it's a lifetime. And notice what one of the requirements are for someone who is an overseer of the church. They must be hospitable. And this is the term that he uses in the book of, it shows up in evangelistic hospitality. Think of one of the traits that has become so foreign in our day and age. Not like hospitality is a strange thing. You don't welcome people in. You don't live life with people. You isolate. You protect your castle and your kingdom and your world. And you certainly don't go to strangers, stranger danger. And maybe in some cases that's a real legitimate thing. But as a way, we live that way generally, don't we? We're not interested in meeting new people. They could be scary. They could be weird. We're weird and scary. And so this is where courage shows up. Normal day in and day out. And you see 4 things underneath there. Greeting people. What if we just had this heart? When I go out, when I'm at work, when I'm in the store, I'm just going to be friendly. I'm going to smile at people. I'm going to say hello to someone. If we make that awkward eye contact with a stranger, I'm going to say hi. It's weird, but it's fine. That's where it starts, right? Like, no one's ever going to want to talk to you or come to your house or sit with you if you're a jerk and grumpy all the time. It's as simple as that. Courage shows up in a smile. And when I'm out in public, the second thing there is engage with people. This was something a number of years ago. I think it was maybe after I read this book. I had determined, like, when I'm out in public spaces, I'm standing in line or I'm doing something, I'm not going to pull my phone out. That's what everybody else is doing, but I'm not going to do that because there may be an opportunity in front of me that I am missing. And so we stop staring at screens and ways to distract us, and we pray for and look for opportunities to talk to people. These are the places you can't plan for this. It's inconvenient. You may be in a rush. You got things to do. You got to go to the store. You got to buy stuff for dinner or meal or whatever. But they're wonderful moments. You're going on a flight. Rather than playing, oh God, please don't let me sit next to someone, or pray, God, there may be someone I'm going to sit next to. Let me see it. Let me see them as you see them. So we greet people, we engage people, and we make dinner a priority. This is where it gets a little bit difficult because sports schedules come in with kids. Work schedule comes in. I don't want to cook anything for someone. It takes work to invite people into my home and my life. And I think to some degree, Martha Stewart has ruined hospitality for us because we think it's, well, I've got to have nice decor in my house. I've got to have a space big enough. I've got to be able to cook this way. And we think hospitality is about presentation rather than relationships. Right? That's making dinner a priority. What an exile thing to do, a foreign thing to do, to say, for me, for my family, this isn't just another part of our schedule where occasionally we invite folks over. Like, we have been welcomed in to the glorious good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We were foreigners, we were exiles, we were outsiders to God. And Christ has sent out the invitation. Sent it out like this is the parables, right? One of the parables is that there was a king who was throwing a banquet, and he sends it out to first the nation of Israel, and they come back with all these lame excuses. Oh man, I just got this new oxen I got to try out. I got this thing over here that I'm doing, and you think about like the king just offered you a banquet, and you're going to make some kind of excuse as to why you can't be there. So servants come back, hey, they can't come. All right, fine, go a little bit further out. And they go out and there's still room. Man, go out into the streets. Go out into the countryside. Go and find people to welcome in. This is the hospitality, the evangelistic, the good news hospitality that God through Jesus has extended to us. And so it has to be, if we're truly faithfully going to follow Jesus and show courage in this day and age, that this is how we orient our lives. And it's for our family, that has actually looked like when we look at our year, each year, we set up our rhythms and our disciplines as a family. Part of that conversation is like, who and how are we going to welcome people in? We can do a couple times a month or intentionally do this and anything in between. And we sit down, and it has been so fun, especially having toddlers. They make hospitality so easy because they're adorable. But even when you're not at home, right? The welcoming in is not just at our home, but we want our houses not to be something we cling to as dear and near to us, but something to be used where we want to say, we want this space to just be a refuge from the world. We're going to welcome folks in, and when they're here in this place, it's not because our house is really nice and it's a big space that it's hospitable, but because they know the presence and love of Christ when they're in it. That's what makes hospitality for the Christian especially unique. It's not just that there's good food and drink and celebration and relationships that are going on there. It's that who's at the core of all of that. And what we're welcoming people into. It's when you're out on the street. Man, nobody told me, I'm a little bummed about it. Nobody told me, man, when you have an adorable baby, you're going to be at the gas station, you're going to be on a road trip, and strangers who would have nothing to do with you otherwise would be like, oh man, they're so cute. Like, how old are they? You're like, dang it, I wasn't ready for those opportunities, right? But they're there. So even if you don't have a cute toddler to do that with, you can still be nice. You can still engage with people. You can still welcome people in. And then that fourth point of loving the outsider. Imagine what it would do, especially to the conversations around social justice in this country, if all of us understood we were outsiders. We were distant. We were foreigners. We were more than that. We were haters of God in our sinful state. It doesn't matter if you got saved at 8 or 80. You are a hater of God, and God's hospitality is so crazy and incredible that he would take people who are rebels of the kingdom and make them citizens. Right? That's the type of hospitality we've been shown. And Hebrews even exhorts us, I didn't put that text down, but Hebrews exhorts us, be certain to show hospitality to everyone, because some have entertained angels and not known it, which is, you can get all kinds of crazy stuff there. But the point is, be hospitable to everyone, because you don't know what someone's going through. You don't know what they've been like. And you're right. I think about these conversations around the immigrant and around foreigners in this country. And I don't have all the answers of how all that should play out legally. And I think anybody else that thinks they do is don't listen to them. Ignore what they're saying. But I do think about this. I tried to place myself, if I lived in Mexico and I had a family, I don't know what you know about Mexico. That's not a great place to live. As a father, I would want to do everything that I can to get my family out of that situation. And again, what about the criminals and what about the bad people? I get all of that. But we're talking about human beings created in the image of God, just like we are ourselves. And many of them don't know the hospitality of Christ. I've heard stories of people, Minneapolis, there's this video that we played at our previous church one time, and it was the testimony of a Muslim person who had lived in this country for decades. And they told the story of a Christian who had welcomed them into their home. And so we lived in Minneapolis, I think it was something like 20 years, and no one had ever invited them into their home. Friends, that's ought not to be among us. It's not that we have to go out and find people and we're like, hey, you're a stranger, foreigner to me, like come into my house. But at the same time, have hearts that say, anyone and everyone is welcome in our home. Like I want our boys to see that. It's been so fun. We have Venezuelan neighbors, and unfortunately we're losing them, which is a bummer, even though Zeke did hit the one with a plastic golf club. And that's not hospitality, but it all worked out. We didn't have to help pay medical bills because it was just a bruise and not broken. But one of the greatest gifts that we got when we moved into our new house was actually from Bethany's parents, a swing set. And we had this Venezuelan family. I think the other family's from Venezuela as well. They're from Latin America. You're right. They're Hispanic. And that has become a place where those little kids, they're coming. We say, hey, you can come and play anytime that you want, or you see us out here, or even if we're not out here, you'd like go for it. And they're coming to Zeke's birthday party this week, right? What an amazing opportunity that there is there. And again, bragging on my wife, she, for they had a little guy that's like 3, he had a birthday party. So she found a book about Jesus in Spanish from Amazon. Right? That's not extraordinary. We say, okay, you guys are moving. Dang it. But at the very least, they heard and they saw. Welcome. I don't know how long they've been here. The mom doesn't speak much English. I can't imagine they've been here terribly long. But how many people have welcomed them in? I don't know. But some have entertained angels and not known about it. So we're gonna welcome that in, even if nobody else does. But this is the stuff that shapes communities. There's a book called Love Your Neighbor, I think. And it talks about you understanding, especially as it comes to your neighborhoods, who lives around you. And one of the things that happened in this book, the people that wrote the book had the opportunity to meet with city leaders. And they say, how can we help? How can we make things better in our city? And their response was actually really simple and profound. The city would be a lot better if people just loved their neighbors. Just welcome your neighbors in. And so this is we've made this another one of the tasks that Christians have to do, rather than saying, as we've been welcomed into Christ, we're just going to live our lives that way now. This is radically different than the world around us. And this is the quote from the book. We have to be willing to go outside our comfort zones to get our hands dirty. Jesus did. Right? And so the more that we mature and grow and we're filled with courage, we say, hey, man, Ben had brought this up last week. Maybe one of the barriers to us is that we just don't care, which is a shame on us. All right? There's somebody who's separated from God. There's somebody, or we don't even know. We don't even care to know, right? But man, I have beheld glory. Why would I want to keep that from somebody else? They can mock me for it. And I've had this is how it's looked in my own life. I started at the gym at One Life. In part because I was training for that Spartan race, and I ain't about running in like the wintertime, so that was part of it. But also another part of it was like, I don't know people here yet. I need to make some friends. And I've done that in extraordinary ways. One of the guys that works at the counter, I maybe overplayed my hand a little bit. I asked him if we could hang out and get lunch, and he's like, yeah, sure. I was like, oh, sweet. You don't really know me. Okay, cool. And then he texted me back, I'm like, man, I don't really know you, so I don't feel comfortable yet. I'm like, okay, totally understand. And so I'm like, all right, the rest of my time, like, he's going to get to know me. We're going to figure this thing out. I'm going to ask him how I can pray for him. And then there's another guy, his name's Darren. He's got some sort of mental stuff going on. I don't know exactly what, but he's the nicest person in that gym. And so there's probably something wrong with us, not him. And man, he was riding the bike one day, said hello, and now he's written me letters, and he texts me far too often. But we had lunch this past week, and I've invited him. Hopefully we'll see him here on a Sunday morning at some point. All right, but and I don't say those things to brag on us, like, hey, look how awesome we are. But I say that to say that's been an absolute joy and delight to live that way. It actually becomes not an inconvenience to try to figure out how we're going to be hospitable, but to say, man, how glorious it is that God has welcomed us into the gospel. And we want to do everything that we can for others to get in on that, because it's so good. And so that's where it shows up. Hospitality. We'll do comments and questions at the end here, because Ron, I know you're about to drop some wisdom on us, but I don't want to say anything after you say it. So, because everything I say is going to compare to that. But then the third thing is this: just embracing the moment that you're made for. Who had Psalm 139, 13 to 16? Peggy. How much time do we spend longing for days gone by? Wishing we were somewhere else. Wishing, as the psalmist, I remember when things were really good. What happened to those days? Or at a cultural level, things were really, really good. And I have to ask the question, for maybe 10 years in between World War II and Vietnam, what do you mean when you say, I remember when things were way better? People tell me all the time, I've been told, man, I'm so sorry you have to be a pastor in this day and age. And I'm going, when was it ever good or convenient to be one? When has sin not infected all of us? Or with our boys, man, just to raise kids and bring them into this world. When has it ever been safe to bring them into the world? But when we embrace, I was born to be here in this moment in Hagerstown or wherever you're at in 2026, because my days were ordained as such. And God knows me deeply and intimately, and he didn't put me here by accident. That frees us up. Be I wasn't born for the 1950s. I wasn't born for 2021, 50. I was born for here, for today. My moment is now. And I'm going to embrace it. I'm not going to long for things to maybe be better someday in the future or wish they were some way where they weren't in the past. Again, so here, let me, just try to frame this. This is why I love history, because it helps us not freak out about things. It's entirely possible, and was possible, someone lived through, this is going a little bit, maybe more of a stretch, but it's possible. Someone lived through the Civil War, the Spanish-American War, World War I, and World War II. And a little bit, maybe Vietnam. You could stretch that. Somebody could have lived through all of that. Was that a better time to be alive than now? Maybe in some ways. But the whole world's on fire, and our whole world's at war. At worst, at this point, we have the threat of another world war. We're not in one yet. So it's hard to say that there were times when things were always better. There are some things that are better today than they have been in the past. The past is pretty barbaric when you study it long enough and hard enough. But we can't spend our days wishing away We were somewhere else, or in the past, or in the future. But we embrace Psalm 139. He formed me. He knew me. My days were ordained by him, and he didn't put me here on accident. I haven't experienced the things I've experienced on accident. There's no, again, people get weird about the mystery of God and his sovereignty and how it actually all plays out in his providence. But I know this for sure. Nothing's wasted by him. And I refuse to live in a universe where things just happen. That's a terrible way to live. That's a terrible world to live in. But one in which there is a God who is superintending over everything and knows all of it, and he's even going to use the brokenness. Have you thought about the fact that that's how he saved the world? He is so much more powerful than sin and the brokenness of this world that he used those very means by which to save it. It's how he ordained it to take place, to prove his sovereignty over all of it. And that we wouldn't necessarily want to go so far as to say that he causes all of it, but we would want to say for sure none of it's wasted. So he made me for today, and when we embrace that, we become unstoppable. We become courageous. And so I want to end with a couple of quotes here, and then, as I said, I don't want to take too much of your time, and I'll walk you through really quickly that resource that I gave you on the second page of that packet. But this is how he ends the book. This alone is worth the price of admission. Take heart. We serve a God of infinite riches and knowledge. We are small, but he's able. Take heart. We live for a God who has fought for us and is fighting for us and will return for us. History has already been decided. Take heart. We are invited into that story, pushing back the darkness with the light of Christ. Take heart. Christ is risen, and we can stand on his grace and look to his eternity. Take heart wherever you are. God has given you all that you need to live with holiness, with integrity, devotion, and evangelistic hospitality. Take heart. You were quite literally made for this moment. It's a great time to be a Christian. Take heart. And then this final quote, I want this maybe to haunt us a little bit as far as us pursuing holiness. If I don't enjoy Christ, I won't speak of him. Or perhaps worse, I will, but without love and enjoyment. And if my mouth does give away my heart, people will hear of an unwanted Christ, and who would want that? First time I read that has haunted me. I don't care about all the apologetic answers. I don't care about being right or wrong. What I do want, no one can say to me, that guy, I don't know what it was. Exactly. Or they will, because I have a big mouth and can't shut up. But he enjoyed Christ. He knew him. He's been with him. Whatever else they say about me, I want that to be true for us. So that's hopefully just filled you with courage a little bit more and given you maybe some more practical steps to take in how this looks and how we can together and as individuals live this way. Closing thoughts and comments before I